Hello, good morning, cherished viewers of Cafdil TV. I believe you are all doing well. The weather is not too bright here in Cape Coast, but we believe that for God, whatever we are here to achieve will be successful. We are here at the Seat of Wisdom Chaplaincy at the University of Cape Coast, celebrating the 50 years of the Jesuit present here in Ghana. If you are joining us on Facebook, remember also that you can also join us on YouTube, Cafdil Edu. You kindly subscribe, click on the bell notification icon so that anytime we upload new videos, be sure that you are going to get it. If you're also watching us on YouTube, you can also recommend to a friend to join us on Facebook, which is Cafdil Cape Coast. Cafdil Cape Coast on Facebook and Cafdil Edu on YouTube. Since we are celebrating the Jesuits are known to be intellectuals. I don't know how true is that. Father is here and he will tell us more. Good morning, Father, and you're most welcome.
Good morning, sister.
How are you doing and how are you feeling, Ghana?
I'm feeling very excited to be part of this event and I'm happy to be here. Thank you for having me on your channel.
Thank you very much. It is believed that Jesuits are intellectuals. How true is that?
Well, we have been involved in education for so many years, but we do other things. We run parishes, we run retreat centers. If you really need a place to go and reflect and pray and meditate, come to us. So we do that. We do retreat. We do parish work. We do education. Yes, we run some of the best schools in the world. We have the largest network of schools in the Catholic Church, over 2,700 educational institutions in the world. So you can say we are involved in education. But to give us the tag as intellectuals of the church, well, maybe not, but we do other things. Yes.
Okay, so this is just an iceberg of what is going to happen today, a public lecture all for the celebration of 50 years of the Jesuits present in Ghana. I am Sister Marian, Society of the Infant Jesus member, and I'm here with Father Emmanuel
Ugweje of the Society of Jesus. I am a Jesuit priest, and I've been assigned to Ghana to start the proposed Campion Jesuit College. And I live in Brafia where we have a retreat center, but I commute to where we are going to have the school. And the plan is to start the school next year. I'm also the chairperson for this anniversary celebration, 50th anniversary celebration. So that's what I am doing presently.
Nice shirt you have there
Yes.
for the celebration. I believe I'm going to get mine after.
Well, we pray. Yes, certainly. This is a shirt for our 500 years of existence of the Society of Jesus. So, and this is also an anniversary. We decided to have a special shirt on it.
I hope you heard him right. He said 500 years of existence.
Of the Society of Jesus.
Exactly. And 50 years in Ghana. So you can imagine. 450 years ago, they never thought of Ghana. But thanks be to God, 50 years ago, they decided to come. So, Father, tell us, how did this journey begin 50 years ago in Ghana?
Yes, Father Patrick Ryan of the Society of Jesus was assigned from the New York province after he finished his doctoral studies in Islamic studies. So he was assigned to Ghana in 1974 to take up a teaching appointment at the University of Ghana. So he arrived in 1974 and took up a lecturing appointment at University of Ghana at Legon. And then after that, a number of other Jesuits came, including Father Raymond Adams, who was assigned to Ghana in 1986, and he taught in the sociology department at University of Cape Coast. But unfortunately, in 1989, he was killed in Ghana. Then Father Patrick Ryan was reassigned to Cape Coast, where he taught Islamic studies. And
Father, before you continue, what happened? Why was he murdered?
well, the story we heard was that there was this person he was helping, refugee, maybe suspect was a refugee, was helping. At the time, they realized that he had become dependent on father, and father tried to say, "Okay, stop. You have to be on your own now." And in the night, he came, broke through the window, and kind of used machete all over Father Raymond Adams. So that was 1989. After that, uh, Father Raymond Adams was also building the retreat center then in Brafia. So when he died, Father Patrick Ryan was now assigned to Cape Coast to take his position at the University of Cape Coast. Yes.
Oh, that was a pathetic
Yeah.
story. Okay, so let's continue. What happened from
Well, after that, Father, then we had some Jesuits in training who lived in Brazil and studied in UCC. Then, over the years, that place became a full-time retreat center where people can come and pray and meditate and uh, spend some time with the Lord. So we have a retreat center there in Brafiao. We have a parish in Bachona in Accra, which we run. Before that parish, we were running St. Anthony's Parish in Nungwa. And right now also we have AJI, Arupe Jesuit Institute, that will be looking at social analysis, social issues. Living in that house also, we have Father Ibe, who teaches law at the University of Ghana, where all of this started. So we are not in many places, and one of the reasons why we are having this anniversary is to reflect on our 50 years presence in Ghana and see areas we need to move in. And we have discerned, and one of the areas we want to move in is secondary education, and we are planning to start a secondary school next year in Budwata, as I had mentioned earlier.
Thank you very much, Father. We will have you after the program.
Sure, sure.
So we're going straight to the auditorium to begin this public lecture. Stay tuned.
Thank you for the opportunity to gather together and work towards a common goal. St. Paul says, "Give thanks in all circumstances, for this is the will of God in Christ Jesus for you." May our hearts, Lord, be filled with gratitude as we celebrate the 50th anniversary of Jesuit presence in Ghana. We gather today for a public lecture. We pray you, Lord, to help us to listen attentively with open hearts and minds. Help us to seek to understand the different perspectives. We pray that you will give us the discernment to make the best decisions after this lecture for the greater good. We commit our speaker and all other guests into your mighty hands. Use them as an instrument in search for freedom and justice. We trust that with your guidance and grace, we can achieve a sense of unity and work together effectively. May our words be filled with love and respect for one another, and may our actions reflect the unity we strive for. Let this be our desire today as we engage in discussions and make decisions that impact others. May we make our prayer through Christ our Lord. Amen. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit.
Thank you so much, Father Queenie. Please, if you need any assistance, we have some ushers around. Just call on them and they will help you out. Since the program is open, permit me to introduce to you our chairman for this occasion. Our chairman is Professor Domui Dabere Kompole, who is a renowned academic and a former vice chancellor of the University of Cape Coast, Ghana. He hails from Nandom in the Upper West region of Ghana. He began his educational journey at Nandom Secondary School, where he completed his General Certificate of Education, O-level and A-level, between 1971.
He has also been involved with the Association of African Universities and served as chairman of the Vice Chancellor's Ghana VCG. His commitment to the propagation of French language and culture has earned him prestigious honors from the French government, including the Chevalier de l'Ordre de Palme Académique in 2007 and the Officier de l'Ordre de Palme Académique in 2013. Beyond academia, Professor Kumpole is actively engaged in community development as chairman of the Kumpole Foundation for Educational Support and Advocacy, Maluna, in the Nandom traditional area, and a dedicated farmer. He is married to Professor Alfredina A.Z. Kumpole, and they are blessed with 2 children and 2 wards. Ladies and gentlemen, Professor D.D. Kumpole as our chairman for this august occasion. Sir, you can take your seat up here. Coming with him is the rep of Archbishop, Very Reverend Father Bonaventure Annan, representing our Archbishop. Father, please, you can join our chairman upstage, please. Let's give it up to him as he comes. Then before his introduction, Father Michael Mayer, kindly join them upstage for us. Father Michael Mayer, kindly join them upstage for us. Thank you. Let's give it up to him. Thank you so much. I would now...
Please. You know, you always have the impression you can go hidden. But some people think that you should not stay in your one corner waiting for tramadol, or is it tramol, to be excited. But because we've worked together, she knows a bit about my life. What you don't know is that I do a lot of maize, sorghum, and banana in a region that nobody thought banana could grow and do well, in the Upper West region. So, thank you very much. Right, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. If you don't answer, I'll greet you in French. Good morning. Bonjour. Comment allez-vous? Voilà. At least I have somebody I can speak French with. And he's happy to have somebody he can. Voila. So, we have waited all this long. And I don't want to believe it is Ghana maybe time. Certain circumstances would have delayed us. But the topic is very catchy, very enticing, and that can arouse a lot of curiosity. Jesuit education tied around justice and freedom. And those of you who know a bit of the work of the Jesuits, and I know Father Michael will be talking more about that. Their principles center on education, very solid education, social justice, and missionary work. And these are 3 key areas that target justice, freedom of human beings. We are born free, but others think and decide that some others should be in bondage. Should that be the case? And I think that is why Jesuit education opens the minds of people, trains people to be critical about their own life, to be critical about humanity, and also to be of service to humanity. You know, and one thing, reading some French literature, in the 15th, 16th century, when Jesuit work started, almost every rich family in France wanted their child to be a Jesuit. I stand to be corrected. But the literature that we have read, because it is a learned society, a very learned society, very critical in their outlook. Father will be telling us whether Ignatius of Loyola or Loyota, I always mix up the names, whether he ever used the name Jesuit or somebody else decided that they should be called Jesuit. But it's because of their work centered around Jesus Christ. They work with Jesus, they dream with Jesus, and they speak with Jesus. So I think this is why we are here. If we think that our coat of arms bears these two key words, freedom and justice, yet we should ask ourselves, are we really free? Do we really enjoy freedom? And what is that freedom that we think we are enjoying? Is there any justice in our system? Is there any fairness in our system? Is there any justness in our system? So I think these are the key words we should be hearing and getting to learn today from Father Michael Maher. Maher, yeah. Okay, merci. You know, and I will end by saying that at the frontage of the University of Ibadan, UI, I read a poster that intrigued me. There was this young boy pointing to a writing, "Corruption deprived me of education." Corruption deprived me of education. This was in Nigeria at UI, the main entrance. I said that could be very true. Ignorance also deprives a lot of people education. So education opens the doors to so many things. Education should help us develop and should help us assist each other as human beings. I'll sit down by telling a story, of my own life. When I was growing up at secondary school, I went to a mission school. And I need to be grateful to the missionaries but for them, and for most of us from the Upper West, we will not be sitting here talking with you. We didn't have government secondary schools. Even government basic schools, we had just one or two in the whole of the Upper West region. And if you were not from the chief's palace, you were never to go to school. And even in the chief's palace, it was the stubborn children who were sent to school. Or children without parents, whose parents had died. They were the ones sent to school to go and suffer. So I am grateful, and most of us are grateful to the missionaries. So back at Nadab Secondary School, we had only Reverend brothers, most of them from Holland, the FIC brothers. And we were either trained to become Reverend brothers or to go to the priesthood. Getting to O-level, my attention was divided. Was I to go and wear the cassock, or was I to go into another profession or vocation? And I have three sisters who are with the local branch of the sisterhood, SMI, three of them from the same parents. They thought it was my father, who was still a traditional worshiper, who was preventing me from going to the seminary. They went to see him. He said, well, he's my first son, but the decision to go to the priesthood or marry is his choice. But I would have wished he replaced me. So they came back to me and I said, you know what, sisters? My attention is much more on the other vocation, because I had a lady who was pulling me far away from the priesthood. In fact, the attention on her was much more on the priesthood or brotherhood. And thank God, today she is my roommate. Otherwise, I would have been angry. So, ladies and gentlemen, we have so many vocations. We are called to so many professions, but we target one and the same thing: education, justice, and freedom. And so I can only succeed to coordinate if you pay attention, because I have a very bad habit, and that is I never ever succeed in summarizing speeches. And those who know me, they know that I don't often summarize, because if you summarize, the tendency is to dilute or to deviate completely from the speaker's viewpoint. So I would rather encourage you to listen keenly, attentively, and later during questions and comments time, you help me to understand better the talk. So I count on your collaboration and your assistance. So on this note, my Reverend Father, Vicar General, representing His Grace the Archbishop, the speaker this morning, and Reverend Fathers, senior colleagues, brothers and sisters, let us together sit back and enjoy the thoughts to be shared with us by our Father, coming all the way from the world. Thank you very much for coming, and thanks once again.
Thank you to Professor Domwini Dabri-Kompole. We have come to the summit of this morning's occasion, and to give us the lecture is Father Michael W. Ma, SJ, PhD. Father Michael W. Ma, SJ, is a distinguished Jesuit priest and scholar whose academic journey has been marked with a deep commitment to studying history, theology, and the Society of Jesus. He is an adjunct history instructor at Marquette University, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, United States of America. After earning a Bachelor of Arts in Philosophy and Letters from the St. Louis University in 1980, he continued his theological education at the Jesuit School of Theology in Berkeley, obtaining a Master of Divinity in 1986 and a Master of Sacred Theology in 1987. His interest is in the intersection of spirituality and art was evident in his thesis on the influence of the spiritual exercises of John Lorenzo Bernini's works. Father Ma further solidified his academic credentials by earning a PhD in history from the University of Minnesota in 1997, focusing on Jesuit congregations in Rome. Father Ma's research primarily explores the methods by which the Society of Jesus implemented its spiritual practices among non-Jesuits, with a particular emphasis on intercultural dialogue between China and the West during the early modern period. Father Ma will examine the individual parts identified in this talk, starting with the idea of education and its importance. Next, there will be an examination of what characterizes a Jesuit education and how these characteristics will assist in the project of moving towards the knowledge and practice of freedom and justice. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me receive Father Michael W. Ma. Oh, we can do better for him. Welcome, sir.
Thank you. Not since my mother has died have I heard such nice things about me. Well, thank you. And I thank our commentator for his fine words, and the representative of the Archbishop here, and Father Bonaventure's presence here helps us understand that the Jesuits, members of religious congregations, and laity, we all work together for the kingdom of Christ. So thank you all for your presence. And I'd like to recognize two members of the Society of Jesus here who are celebrating in a special way the 50th anniversary of the Jesuits here in Ghana. Ghana gained independence on March 6, 1957, a special day for Ghana and an important event for other communities of the African continent, since only a decade earlier, most Africans saw independence as far distant on the horizon. A month later, from the establishment of the Republic of Ghana, perhaps a lesser event occurred on April 4th, 1957. I was born. Haven't changed a bit. So the Republic of Ghana and I are only 1 month apart. And coincidentally, I entered the Jesuits almost 50 years ago on August 13th, 1975. So the Jesuit presence in Ghana and my presence in the Jesuits share the same length of time. The purpose of this talk is to help shape a conversation concerning the importance of education within the Republic of Ghana, and specifically how Jesuit education can assist the people of Ghana in moving towards what they have identified, what you have identified as their values, justice and freedom. Much has been written as to the nature of a Jesuit education. One quote from history must serve to identify the merits of the system. The English Jesuit, the English philosopher Francis Bacon, he wasn't a Jesuit, he was not a Catholic and he didn't like Catholics. He had this to say about Jesuit education in 1622. In terms of what concerns good pedagogy, look to the Jesuits. In this talk, I want to examine the subject of this talk, the noun, education, and then we're going to look at the adjective, Jesuit. Now, we want to start with something we can all agree with, which in Ghana may be a difficulty, but in the United States is an impossibility. But let's start with something we all agree with. All values have structures. Considering this, so if you think of something you value, you'll notice you have a structure to support it. You value family, you have time. You value clean water, you have plumbing. Every value has a structure. Considering this obvious relationship between values and structures, we can understand a society or an institution in terms of what is its supporting structures. Structures are what a society or an individual expends its time, its real estate, or its capital. And these exist as the best indicators of an institution's values. Institutions frequently have stated values, but they have no supporting structures. I call these brochure values. It's on the brochure, but there's no structure to support it. If it's a real value, it has a real structure. Keeping this relationship between values and structures in mind, we may understand two ways a community goes into crisis. One way a community goes into crisis is a community has values, but it has no means to attain these values. It knows what it wants, but it can't get it. The other way a crisis occurs is when a society or an institution has developed fundamentally different values or seems adrift in its abilities to express its values. Jesus spoke to this point when he said, "A servant cannot have two masters." Recalling that structures demand resources, the second type of crisis not only creates a conflict of values, but a contest for resources. For this reason, St. Ignatius referred to as diversity as the mother of all discord. Diversity was the mother of all discord. For Ignatius, diversity of fundamental values equated nothing less than a civil war. A diversity of means towards a commonly held value was well within the Ignatian tradition. We see this idea of diversity of expression within the story of Jesuit history by the various ways Jesuits such as Matteo Ricci and Roberto de Nobili in India embrace different cultures to express the values of the Catholic faith. Diversity of means, but not diversity of values. The crisis we experience in the United States with our educational institutions is that we embrace diversity, but we have diversity with no direction. If a society wishes to survive, it must establish structures that will pass on two things to the next generation: the knowledge of its fundamental values and the way to attain these values. These are, go to the next. Oh, okay. The knowledge, we call these structure an education. An education is the structure created by a society to pass on its fundamental values to the next generation. The task of education, education is fundamentally a particular structure established by a society to pass on its values to its younger members and the means to attain these values. The task of education has three fundamental parts. First, an education must identify or embrace the fundamental values of a society. Second, education must successfully transmit these values to its younger members. That transmission is what we call pedagogy. And the third, an education must teach young people the skills necessary to attain and advance these values. Although the values of a given society or an institution may vary, the fundamental task is the transfer of values and the skills needed to attain these values. This is an education. Now, before I describe the role of a Jesuit school plays in the identification, transmission, and acquisition of skills for advancement of values, a word must be said on the first and primary place where the identification and the transmission of values occurs, and that, of course, is the family. In the 19th century, Marxist ideologies attacked the family by establishing a system that saw child rearing as the domain of an ideology, placing the state above individual and family. The Catholic Church led the counterattack, especially by means of papal encyclicals. They launched a barrage of attacks against this idea that the state should control the family. They held firm that the family is the first and foremost educators of children. These are the various, you can't see it for Ella, but from Leo XIII forward, every single pope has come out with a papal encyclical on the importance of the family as the primary means for the transmission of values. The Catholic Church's fundamental teaching holds and professes the dignity of the individual and that the family is prior to the state and regards the state in the service of the dignity of the individual and the protection of the family. The Church regards someone who despises the inherent dignity of the individual and the natural order of the family is someone who despises the fundamental foundation of human society and advocates nothing less than cultural suicide. The realization of the importance of the family is particularly true for young people attending primary and secondary schools. Jesuit education is not a replacement for the family. It is an extension of the values held by the Catholic family and the Church teaching on the family. When we recall the relationship between values and supporting structures, the importance of education with the community becomes more important. And education identifies values, judges the merits of these values, provides the technical and intellectual means to attain these values, and constantly makes judgments concerning how the community is progressing to achieve these values. If I could leave you with only one idea, it would be the realization that the education of youth should exist as the fundamental concern of any community, simply because by means of an education, a nation forms its most important resources, its children. It is no surprise that terrorists of rational civilization are those persons who attack and infiltrate two of a society's most important institutions, families and schools. It is no surprise then that the Catholic Church has always valued and supported these structures which support family and education. Your presence here indicates your awareness of the importance of education and what the Jesuits can bring to the project of education, an education that supports and advances individual families and the family of the nation. A system of education simply indicates the structure used for the transfer of values. In and of itself, education does not have any inherent value, except it is the means for teaching values. So what we need to do now is to look at what defines the values of a specific system of education. We need to look at the adjective. And in this case, the adjective is Jesuit. What values are fundamental to the Jesuits and therefore to their system of education that bears their name? What may seem to be a difficult task is simple, since we have a very precise description of the ultimate values of the Jesuits given to us by Ignatius of Loyola, the founder of the Jesuits. St. Ignatius, we find this identification of fundamental values in a document called the Spiritual Exercises. Let me point out that the Jesuits themselves have identified that all Jesuit ministries, including those of education, have their foundation and trajectory in the spiritual exercises. A set of exercises based on Ignatius' own experience that were created to help people to move towards God. Within these exercises, Ignatius wrote a short paragraph which he titled The First Principle and Foundation. In this paragraph, he noted that the purpose of each human person is to know, love, and serve God. And by this means, by that knowing and serving God, to save their soul, to gain eternal life. He further notes that we need to view creation insofar as it helps us or it hinders us in bringing us to God. Therefore, the ultimate value of our lives is union with God. Now, I would like to note here that Ignatius says nothing about the love of neighbor in the first principle. It is from the love of God that we move to the love of creation made in God's image and likeness, each member of the human family. As Jesus said, the first and most important commandment is to love God, and the love of neighbor then flows from that which we love, God. This movement towards God was clearly stated in the founding document of the Jesuits, the Formula of the Institute. So the Formula of the Institute is our founding document, and it says, this is what it means to be a Jesuit, and this is what we do. He is a member of a society founded chiefly for this purpose, to strive especially for the defense and the propagation of the faith and for the progress of souls in Christian life and doctrine. It's an echo of the first principle, bringing souls to Christ. We need to examine this first principle and foundation very carefully and constantly, because if Jesuit institutions are based on the spiritual exercises, and the spiritual exercises are based on the first principle and foundation, then it logically proceeds that moving people towards God should be the fundamental project of all Jesuit institutions. Guess what? You don't need a committee to find out what Jesuits should be doing. It's already here. Think of the time I've saved you. The first principle identifies the value to be obtained, union with God. But it also outlines the way in which this value will be attained, and this is the correct use of creation. According to the first principle, We are to use creation insofar as it takes us to God. And we are to reject that aspect of creation that removes us from God. The first principle and foundation challenges a person to make a judgment about creation insofar as, and you remember from your Latin, that's tantum quantum. He says that insofar as it will move them towards God. In Jesuit language, we call this discernment. The making the correct choice and use of creation insofar as it will take us towards God, and that love of God entails the love of neighbor. The first principle presents a value, the first and foremost value of the Jesuits, the desire for union with God. Ignatius considered moving people towards God and established the spiritual exercises as a structure to attain that value. But there is another important value in the first principle and foundation, the identification of the necessary role the created world plays in how this first value is attained. Ignatius does not advise us to sit back and wait for divine infusion of grace. He challenges us to combine grace with our investigation of nature. The first principle states that we are to actively engage the world in society and discover what is the best use of creation that will take us towards the love of God and love of neighbor. Thus, the Jesuits have a primary value, that of moving towards God, and they have a secondary value, the challenge of finding God in creation. Now, there has always been a temptation to consider that religion and everything that is beautiful in the world should be simple and clear. Many beautiful things are simple, but many things in life, especially creation, are very complex. Is it any surprise that, considering the first principle and foundation and its identification of creation as the means to help us attain salvation, that Ignatius saw education as one of the primary works of the Jesuits? Ultimately, the purpose of a Jesuit education is to attain a knowledge of creation so that a good discernment can be made concerning how to move towards God. And the last time I looked, creation was a very complex place. Therefore, academic excellence is required to understand how we can use creation to move towards the love of God and love of neighbor. Ignatius gave the church two structures towards God, moving towards God, which was his value. The spiritual exercises was one structure. Go to 22. Was one structure, and the system of education was the other. And this, of course, reflects this idea of faith and reason, an idea that was very near and dear to the heart of John Paul II. Ignatius identified the fundamental value of a Jesuit education as a means to advance its students towards the love of God, as well as to obtain knowledge of the world that will assist them in making good choices towards the love of God and love of neighbor. It is here that we find the importance of academic excellence. Academic excellence is not a goal in and of itself. Rather, it is a means to an end. The pursuit of knowledge of creation, academic excellence, has as its fundamental goal a knowledge of the world so that persons can discern the best possible choices to advance the love of God and the love of neighbor. It is, however, for the Christian a very important means, since each person is part of the mystical body of Christ, and he or she as a Christian has the responsibility to help others to achieve the purpose for which they were created. Academic excellence within the Jesuit system of education, by the embrace of its fundamental values, always sees itself as working for the betterment of others, working together in the community of the church and with other persons of goodwill. Therefore, and this is very important, a Jesuit education is not a flight from the world, finding God only in some charismatic prayer meeting. It is finding God and promoting God in the very essence of creation, moving down into creation, not running from creation. And so, as Ignatius states, the desire to find God in all things. It is for this reason why the Jesuits see the care of the environment as important, and avoidance of the abuse of creation, since it is by means of creation that we move towards God. Damaging creation is like damaging a textbook, because that's where we're going to find truth. Perhaps one of the most important ideas which occurs within a Jesuit education is the constant alignment of knowledge in relationship to the love of God and the love of neighbor. This movement towards God by means of academic excellence serves as a clear designation of Jesuit education. This fundamental purpose of education was made clear by Ignatius when he identified the purpose of education in the constitutions of the order. The aim which the Society of Jesus directly seeks is to aid its own members and their fellow man to attain the ultimate end for which they are created, union with God. To achieve this purpose, addition to the example of one's life, learning and a method of expounding it are also necessary. This idea was echoed in the famous Code of Studies written by the Jesuits in 1599, the Ratio Studiorum. Since one of the leading ministries of our society, the Jesuits, is teaching our neighbors in such a way that they are thereby aroused to a knowledge of our Maker and Redeemer. Do you notice how this reflects the first principle and foundation? This idea of an education as the means to produce love of God and love of neighbor was repeated in a letter from Ignatius to another Jesuit, in which he provides the reason why the choice of education was becoming the primary work of the Jesuits. From among those who are present only students, various persons will in time emerge, some for preaching and the care of souls, others for the government of the land and the administration of justice, and others for other disciplines, responsibilities. In short, since young people turn into adults, their good formation in life and learning will benefit many others. From its very beginnings, Jesuit education always held its educational goal as bringing souls to Christ, so in such a way that this relationship with Christ would work for the physical and moral benefit of others. If a government is created to advance the life of its citizens, then the moral commands of Christianity will support those of good government. Now we must examine the method of education by which the Jesuits taught these values. This subject is far greater than one talk could provide, but I would like to point out one aspect of this method and how it serves to advance the goals of truth and justice: the importance of order and proper arrangement of the subject matters. To understand how this occurs within the complete trajectory of a Jesuit education, we must look back to the life of St. Ignatius, his own experience, and how these experiences help shape a system of education that bears his name. Many of us have heard the story of St. Ignatius, how he was raised as a courtier and gave into the temptations of the world in his youth. Ignatius was at the Battle of Pamplona, a battle between France and Spain, when a cannonball broke his left leg. A protracted period of recovery in his family castle left him bored, and to relieve that, he turned to two books, A Life of Christ and A Life of the Saints. A little side. Isn't it interesting that Ignatius' conversion came from reading? These books, his free will and God's grace, helped to really relocate his values from being a courtier to a dedicated follower of Christ. His spiritual journey led him to a year-long stay in the small city of Manresa, where he continued to work on his spiritual exercises, which he then followed with a trip to Jerusalem. His great fervor and interest in fighting the Muslims in the Holy Land indicated to the Franciscan caretakers that Ignatius had tremendous piety but little prudence, and so they kicked him out. On the boat home, Ignatius came to the realization and the consequences of a very important fact, a realization that I have spent much study and research. Problems are caused by stupid people. I'm coming out with a book on the subject. It is here that Ignatius made a choice that is perhaps one of the most important, had the most important effect on the Society of Jesus. Ignatius chose to join his spiritual insights with those insights gained by the means of higher education. This was not an insignificant choice, since it was not the choice made by saints like Francis of Assisi. When Francis of Assisi had his vocation, he hit the streets. Famous story of St. Francis, as he said, preach if you must. You preach always and use words when necessary. Jesuits say, always preach the gospel, and we expect 4 articles a year. And so, but this choice of Francis, so we must take Ignatius' choice seriously. Ignatius saw the necessity of moving towards God, but to do so with all the helps human wisdom had to offer. He wanted to combine his spiritual experience with a university experience. After 2 false starts of his educational career in Alcalá and Salamanca, Ignatius went to the University of Paris. This choice of a school had a profound consequence on the order. It was at Paris that he gathered a group of companions who would then be the founding members of the order, and he experienced a system of education that would incorporate, and he would incorporate and make the foundation for what would be later known as a Jesuit education. The educational system in Paris comprised 3 distinct but very related fields of study: humanities, philosophy, and theology. The first section was the humanities, the particular facts acquired by human reason. The first part of the humanities were the subjects that fell under the designation of the trivium, beginning with grammar, then logic, then rhetoric. Now I want to say a few words about grammar. Grammar, properly understood, is not some fussy obsession with the rules of writing and speaking. Rather, it supports the idea that words have meaning, and that the meaning of words comes from a historical and social context. Civilization is built on part by communication, and the basis of communication is the necessity for a commonality of speech. The rules of grammar also provide how words are put in correct order so that it makes sense. Grammar does not stifle creativity. Instead, it assures its spread, since a creative work or an important work can be understood. Grammar promotes democracy because it advances community. The study of grammar, first and foremost, is a recognition that there is an external reality and that words can grasp this reality. And if our understanding of reality must change, it must be done so with ideas and words that have a common experience. The 2 enemies of grammar are relativism and individualism. Relativism posits the idea that there is no commonality to experience and by extension, no rules. And individualism places the defining reality of the world into the mind of one person. A defeat of grammar is the barbarian at the gate, for it is nothing less than the advocacy of anarchy or totalitarianism. The story from the Bible about the Tower of Babel is very true. If you want to separate people and create disunity, you attack grammar and language. Although the deeper implications of grammar may not be fully understood by students when they are young, the foundational ideas of grammar will enable them to interact with society. Grammar enables civil discourse, since it establishes a commonality of speech. A firm foundation for education begins with the combination of grammar and values. This is why the Catholic education has always begun at the earliest of levels, what we call grammar school. The next two phases of the trivium were logic and rhetoric. Note the proper order. Grammar established the correct meaning of words and sentence structures. Logic taught the correct assembly of these sentences to express an idea, and rhetoric taught how these ideas could be combined into a clear narrative or story. Grammar establishes the meaning of words and the correct ordering of words, and logic provides that these sentences are presented in a clear fashion. The next course was rhetoric. Under the designation of rhetoric, students learned how to put logical ideas into a well-written or well-spoken narrative. Literature served both as a model for good writing as well as the study of stories which express the human condition. Jesuit schools in the past prided themselves in exposing their students only to the best literature. Ignatius recommended that the best authors, and those of various cultures, were to be used. And if there was an episode in the writing that was a bad example, it was removed. Every educator knows you learn by imitation, and Ignatius held that no good was attained by poor modeling. When a story can cross cultural lines and touches what it really means to be human, we call that a classic. And classical literature from all countries provided the substance of literature taught in Jesuit schools. The Jesuits had no trouble in using non-Catholic authors. Cicero was their favorite model for good writing. Literature was important for the Jesuits, since the study of literature tells us what it means to be human. I often tell people that psychology and sociology is simply Shakespeare set to statistics. Perhaps telling good stories and learning the skills how to create good stories exists as one of the most important things we can teach our children, since our stories carry the truth. Whereas the trivium dealt with how to write and how to think and how to read stories of the human condition, the quadrivium applied logic learned in the trivium to the disciplines of mathematics, geometry, physics, and astronomy. Note the order here, as well as math prior to geometry, geometry prior to physics, and physics was necessary to understand astronomy. Now, the theories behind physics back then were probably wrong, but the ordering of these disciplines is building one upon the other. One of the fundamental characteristics of this system of education was proper order. The first set of courses, the trivium and the quadrivium, were considered the humanities, the skills needed to learn the particulars of a given field of knowledge in the humanities, which included what we would call science. A little break here. One of the biggest mistakes we make in education is we don't consider the sciences humanities. In the classic sense of the humanities are the particulars of human knowledge. Truth in literature, truth in poetry, truth in chemistry, truth in physics, truth in music. One of the biggest problems we have is we say, this is the humanities and this is science. We've disrupted the natural order. So, the humanities, which included what we call science, students led by their teachers should make a thorough and profound study of the material world. Perhaps the two most important ideas learned in the humanities were that an objective truth can be discovered and that one skill builds on the other. The edifice of learning at the University of Paris began with the humanities, then it progressed to philosophy. Both the humanities and philosophies were the product of human knowledge. Whereas in the humanities, one learned the particulars of human wisdom, in philosophy, one reflected on the truths learned from the physical world and the world of human action and drew truths that were, as the Declaration of Independence in the United States states, were self-evident, things that we knew from reason alone. What is a self-evident proposition? Now, a self-evident proposition is something that we arrive at by reason. We are not informed to these propositions by faith. Now, there are three self-evident propositions that I note in the Declaration of Independence, which is interesting. Three things the Declaration of Independence notes that are known by reason. First, that God exists, and that is the source of all rights, and that the human person is the deposit of these rights, and that institutions are created to support these rights. In the United States, that's what we call self-evident propositions. These are truths that are known by reason. It's very interesting. We hold in the United States that God, the dignity of the human person, and institutions are created to preserve those dignities. Those that are given by God and are known by natural reason. In the humanities, by using reason, we can arrive at a definition of justice. Justice is that which is owed a thing according to its nature. In the humanities, one learned about specific natures, such as what was good for a frog or what was good for a plant. And individual stories will tell us what is good for a human person. In the humanities, we learn that humans have certain needs, such as housing, food, and education. In literature, we learn when these things do and do not occur. Justice occurs when the needs of a human person are met. Human needs are not a privilege. They are what it's owed by its nature. Since it is the purpose of the state to support human persons, justice dictates that persons have clothing, food, housing, and an education to the best of its abilities. There is a justice that we're known by reason, and this justice has its basis in the humanities. I mention this because any search for justice in general can only occur with a thorough grounding in the humanities, in the skills learned in grammar, logic, and rhetoric, and the courses of the trivium and the quadrivium in the sciences. Although the higher levels of philosophic thought were not taught in the primary and secondary levels of the Jesuit system, the idea that there was objective truth and this truth could be understood and communicated provided the essential foundation of the humanities as well as a support to philosophical inquiry. The ability to act justly rests on the ability to know what is good for a specific thing, and that starts in the humanities. The study of philosophy reveals three fundamental justices that are known by reason, reflecting on what is learned in the humanities. What is owed to God, what is owed to each human person, and what is owed to society to support other human persons. I'll repeat that here. That natural reason, justice, reveals three things. What we owe to God as the source of rights, that human persons have rights, and that society is created to protect those rights. The Jesuit educational system holds that those are an object of reason and they are not objects of faith. We know these things by objects of reason. Although philosophical inquiry is a more developed study, it cannot occur unless students have a firm grasp of reading and writing and a grasp of the material world. Just as the ability to understand justice is based on the humanities, so is the concept of freedom. For philosophers of the Middle Ages, freedom was not the ability to do whatever one wanted, whenever one wanted. Such a person would confuse true freedom with tyranny and anarchy. Freedom is understood as the ability to act without hindrance in such a way as to achieve a greater good. Freedom is understood as the ability to act without hindrance in such a way as to achieve the greater good. Therefore, to be free, one had to have two abilities. If you wanted to be truly free, you had to have two things. The first was have the skills to recognize the good. So the first object of freedom is, do I have the skills to recognize the good? And the second was the acquisition of skills needed to bring that good to fulfillment. So what do you need to be free? You need the skills to recognize the good, and you need the ability to bring that good into existence. The education that enabled a person to act freely was called a liberal education, from the Latin term libertatis, or free. A liberal education enabled someone to act freely. That is, to have the skills required to recognize the good, and second, to have the skills to bring that good into being. It was not an education for a specific trade. Again, the purpose of a liberal education is to recognize the good and to acquire the skills to bring that good into being. The ultimate object of freedom is justice. The ultimate object of freedom is justice. That a person can act without undue hindrance for the good that is proper to each specific nature, particularly human nature. We can use the human person as an example. In the study of the humanities, which includes what we understand as science, we learn that the human person requires food, clothing, housing, and an education. Providing what is necessary for human nature is justice. It's not a privilege, it's not charity, it's justice. Because these things are necessary for the person to live. These rights are not given by the government, since these rights exist prior to the government. They are inherent in human nature, a nature learned in the humanities, particularly in what we call the sciences and what we learn in literature. At this point, I would like to identify three important points. First, the proper object of freedom is justice. That is, the ability to achieve without hindrance that which is owed a thing according to its nature. A nature learned by academic excellence. Second, we know by a self-evident proposition that there are two fundamental realities, God and the human person, as the source of these rights. It is important to note, as philosophers have, that if there was no prior source of rights, which we refer to as God, then the rights are determined simply by majority rule. The fact that human rights are prior to an individual and prior to the state makes sense that the source of rights, the reality of God, is the proper object of knowledge. It's very interesting. In the United States, no one wants to talk about God. And I'm talking Catholic schools. They don't want to talk about God in the public school. And I said, well, I hope you've taken out the Declaration of Independence. I hope you've taken out the Constitution, because according to these two documents, that's the source of our rights. Doesn't it make sense if you're going to drink the water, you're going to examine where the source comes from? Oh no, we can't talk about that. Well then, take out the document. If you take out God as the source of rights, then rights become the condition of the state, and then we're in trouble, because then it's simply majority rule. And you know what? It doesn't take a lot of advertising to convince people to do something wrong. And third, the removal of God, known by reason, one of the self-evident truths, only leaves humanity at the hands of the laws of nature. Survival of the fittest, our Darwinian worldview that saw the strongest as surviving, a theory that has no place in the understanding of common justice owed to all humanity. Thus, the destruction of the environment and the presence of corruption are contrary to reason, since they run contrary to true human nature. As stated earlier, crisis results when a society attempts to balance values that are in opposition. A society cannot last if it's going to try to value human rights and corruption and destruction of the environment. It's all going to collapse. Either the human person will be respected or they will not. Practices contrary to nature will eventually bring everyone down, even for those who experience temporary benefits. Those familiar with African history are aware of the consequences of European nationalism nourished with materialistic ideology of Darwin and his followers. Survival of the fittest works if human nature is only viewed on a materialistic level, if you take out God. We learn the opposite to be true by a philosophic reflection on the humanities. We can understand corruption is simply imperialism on a local level. Corruption is simply imperialism on a local level. Although a more complex study of what is known by philosophy is the domain of later studies, it starts with grammar school, where a young man or woman learns that there is an objective truth and that truth can be known. The next phase of the method of Paris experienced by Ignatius was theology. Whereas the humanities and philosophies had as their object what is known by natural reason, what we contain by our own thought, theology has as its starting point what is known by revelation. But it was a revelation that was connected to what was learned in the humanities and philosophy. Theology served as the fulfillment of what we know by reason. Perhaps one example will suffice to demonstrate the relationship between reason and faith. In reason, we learn that justice is normative. We can understand what justice is. We can make rules. And that all persons should be the object of justice. This reason identifies a basic equality to all human persons. As we say in the Declaration of Independence, we hold these truths to be self-evident. They're a philosophical proposition. What is known by faith is that Jesus Christ died for all persons and that each person has a great dignity because of the salvific work of Christ. Every human person has a dignity because Jesus died for each one of us. What is known by reason, the rights of the human person, is brought to a higher level by theology. What we know by faith is told in the story of the prodigal son and Jesus' search for the lost sheep. The story tells us we are to understand justice in terms of love and mercy. You will not find mercy in the natural order. What you find in the natural order is survival of the fittest. Thus, when a person attacks the weakest and the vulnerable, that person has descended to the status of an animal. When a person attacks the weakest and the vulnerable, that person has descended to the status of an animal. The theological idea of mercy matches what we learn from our stories, the stories learned in the trivium. Our great literature and our experience learned in the humanities and the stories we need to tell our children. Are we not the most human when we defy the laws of nature, when we transcend what is deserved and act out of compassion? Perhaps the greatest story we need to tell is God's love and forgiveness through Christ, and to tell that story to our children. That is the value we need to pass on in education. Perhaps what Ghana needs, and what we all need, is the intellectual ability to act freely with justice as our goal, but always keeping in mind another virtue, that of mercy. A Jesuit education identifies values. It transmits these values by means of good pedagogy to its students, and it gives them skills to achieve these values and to defend them. It gives them the ability to act freely towards justice. And perhaps most importantly, it aligns justice with mercy. The mercy of the gospel of Jesus Christ. And after this education, those students, as Ignatius identified, will become the cause for improvement for family, society, in Cape Coast, in Ghana, and throughout the world. Thank you.
I think he deserves more. We will all agree that that was a very interesting and insightful speech. But he's still available for questions, clarifications. So if you have one, just raise your hand. We'll get a microphone to you. If you have any question for Father Mar, he's ready. Any suggestions? Any clarifications? Yes, please, a microphone to Adia there.
Please, let's try to be as brief and straight to the point as possible. Your name, where you're coming from, and the question or comment.
Albert Digab Johnson, itinerant preacher and president of the Ambassadors for Reconciliation, Justice and Peace Africa. My question to our erudite speaker, that concerning Jesuit education, in what ways can we rise up as the church worldwide and to speak or fight against the evils in the society, especially the evil of human trafficking, and to speak and act prophetically to set the prisoners free?
Thank you. The question was on human trafficking and the dignity of the human person. I think, again, to go back to what is in essence the purpose of a liberal education. Let's go back, look at and remember, what is the purpose of an education? Is to identify the good and to acquire the skills to implement that good. So what we first and foremost in identifying the good in a Jesuit education is identifying the dignity of the human person. It's very interesting when we look at papal documents, one of the constant words that goes through all the papal encyclicals are dignitatis humanae, the dignity of the human person. When we cannot force a person to act, but what we can force is to say, this is what we understand as the human person. One of the great gifts of church teaching in the 19th century, in the midst of eugenics, and eugenics was basically the idea of that you can breed human persons like you can breed horses. And there were some people you wanted to have children and others you didn't. And it was pretty obvious who they didn't want. And the Catholic Church said there is only one race. There is the human race. And any talk about the separation of human persons is wrong. So what we have to do first and foremost is understand the dignity of the human person. Second of all, we have to look at every value has a structure. If we value human dignity, we will establish structures to support that dignity. And that's where human wisdom comes in. This is where community wisdom comes in. This is where the local knowledge of Cape Coast comes in. What structures will work best to promote this value? So first you define the value in the humanities and philosophy, inspired then by theology, and then you say, what is going to be the best structure? But one of the things is you want to keep the value absolutely clear. Sometimes what happens is we confuse the structure with the value. But what we want to look at in terms of everything from drug abuse, because if we look at it, human trafficking, drug abuse, all the other problems, they're all contrary to human dignity. They all attack the human person. So we have to look at is what is going to, that we clarify the dignity of the human person, known on the natural level and the level of faith, and then look at structures. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. My name is Patrick Sam, Association of Kali Teachers. Thank you for the opportunity. Yeah, my question is, I was very happy with the presentations, especially with the conclusion. But what caught my attention was the first principle of the Jesuit education, which is a spiritual exercise. And the main issue is that education has to draw people to God. Mm-hmm. But one other element that I want us to consider is the financing of education. Now, one of the concerns of parents has to do with access to education and how Catholic education or religious education has become very expensive. Maybe if you can talk to us about how Jesuit education is financed and how we can make education affordable for everybody to access. Thank you very much.
I'll tell you an interesting story that Ignatius of Loyola said, you cannot start a college until it's completely funded, until some very rich person gives you the money. So the question is, one of the consequences of human freedom is, and the reality of the unequal distribution of resources is, how do you get people to give up their money to pay for this? That's a job. And having done some development work, I can tell you it's a big job. And so to make things available, I can tell you, I mean, I don't know the exact mechanism of fundraising in this province, but I can tell you that the best way of raising money is to identify what we are doing is important. And then you just have to say to the person, you know, we're doing our part, are you doing yours? And what's interesting about Catholic education in the United States was people saw it was important. And I think one of the things that you can leave with this talk is to say, an education is the transmission of values. So if you're really serious about values, you're going to support this effort. I think we all have to do a very good job of helping our community in understanding the importance of Catholic education. I'm not going to say the money's going to flow in, but it is a problem. And it's, you know what it is? It's the problem of free will. How do you get people to let loose the cash? And I can tell you, I certainly can't speak for this province, but I know in my province, in my school, 15 years ago at Marquette University, 8% of the students were first generation. Now we're 25%. And so what we're purposely saying, what sort of happened in Jesuit education in the United States, we educated one level and then one level and then one, so now we're all educating doctors and lawyers' kids. And so we're saying, you know, maybe it's time to go back to what we originally saw in educating the immigrant. And so that's, in many ways, we're starting schools now, junior highs, for various economic groups of people. So it is a challenge, but I would say we all need to be fundraisers for Catholic education. We all have to say to people, here is the value and how that value is going to be spread. Thank you.
Thank you and good morning. Congratulations on an excellent presentation. But I'm afraid I have to disagree with one statement that you made, that problems are caused by stupid people. In fact, the problems we are going through today are not caused by stupid people, but by people who are highly intelligent. People who follow the post-humanist philosophies are all people who are relativist in their thinking. They are intelligent people, highly intelligent people. Now, how do we counter the theories that they have proposed, all of which are undermining the integrity of the human person?
When I say that problems are caused by stupid people, I would still say fundamentally they are aware of what Thomas Aquinas would say, a partial truth. And that philosophy helps us expose the wider idea of truth. So I say this as a joke about stupid people, but really problems are caused by ignorance, even by people who have PhDs, because their sight is not humanistic, that they have not embraced what it means to be a human, and especially the insights given to us by God in Revelation. So people can be very smart, and that's how they get to government officials, but they do not have what we would call true wisdom. And that's the wisdom we read in the book of wisdom in the Hebrew Scriptures, is that seeking of the greater wisdom, the greater good. But no, you're absolutely right. Some of these people are pretty conniving, they're pretty smart, but their smartness is they don't understand the whole picture. And so very much our efforts is to understand what it means to be the dignity of the human person. And that will open up, I think, make intelligent people even more intelligent. But thank you for that clarification.
I speak on values and crisis. And you spoke about the sources, and you underscored the fact of the family, which is very important. But not only that, when we go to school, the influence from the peer pressure, and especially at this time, the explosion of social media. So much so that the sanity at a point is blurred. And there comes what we called crisis, because there is conflict of values. So how does an individual resolve this conflict? Conflictual of values, if there are practical ways to resolve it. Father Datson from St. Peter's Seminary. Thank you.
And thank you for your work in the education of priests. You know, we have the reality of social media, and it's amazing how, how this has changed everything for our students. I mean, literally, I turned to some young lady in the elevator. I said, "Can you take that from your hand for at least 3 minutes?" Because they're all like this. I said, so whatever St. Thomas Aquinas, and I quote St. Thomas even though he was a Dominican, it's a joke. St. Thomas Aquinas said that the proportionality for good always follows the proportionality of evil. That as much as good can be, it also has the possibility of evil. So when we look at something, what we have to say is, always undergird our education with this idea of, is this going to help human dignity? Is having a relationship with a cell phone going to help my human dignity? Is getting all my information online going to promote the dignity of others? Getting my information from some unknown web page, is that going to promote the dignity of others? So what we want to use is this grounding of the dignity of the human person, and then we look at individual aspects of creation. And this goes back to Ignatius's tantum quantum, insofar as, does this thing help us insofar as it's going to produce us moving towards God and love of neighbor? So what you want to do is get that grounding very clear, and that's the importance of a primary and secondary education, is to accustom young men and women into the habitual thought of love of God and love of neighbor through good literature, stories, and writing. And then when they're grounded, and then they become philosophically grounded in the higher levels, and then they can make particular. This is the same thing. Let me give an example. Does anyone teach biology here? Oh, good. Thank you, sister. Okay. Now you know from your study of biology, from different life, that putting cyanide in an organism is going to kill it. So we study the nature, and by studying the nature, we know what is going to help a plant and what is not going to be helping a plant. We do that by studying the nature of a thing. And then we can look at particular things and go, yes, no, yes, no. So I go back to this grounding of the emphasis on the human nature. And isn't it interesting in society where people are spreading confusion about human nature? And that's why it's very interesting. Go back to what we experience in our reason of reflecting on the human condition. So when we look at these things like media, when we look at cell phones, web pages, we look at them with the rule of the spiritual exercises insofar as. That's why Ignatius said, you've got to be grounded in the love of God. Because if you're grounded in the love of God, then that's going to be the anchor. So if we're grounded in an awareness of God and an awareness of human nature, then we can make judgments. That's why it is so important to stress in our educational systems, in our continued education, is the dignity of the human person. And Paul is one of the greatest encyclicals. If I could have one thing written, have every Catholic school student read in the higher levels, is John the 23rd's famous encyclical, Pacem in Terris. He was a brilliant man. He writes in Pacem in Terris, 1963, he says, you know, we have prostitution, we have unequal wages for men and women, we have immigration. You'd think the list was written last week. It was written in 63. And he says, we see those as problems. And he says, guess what? John the 23rd was a very good doctor. Good doctors know the difference between the system and what's causing the symptom. He said, this is prostitution, drugs, unequal salaries, immigration. These are not problems. They're symptoms of the problem. The problem is atheism. The rejection of the natural order given to us by God. And he says, what you need is when you bring God into the world and into human rights, all this will go away. And so when we look at these particulars, what we have to say is, to go back what Ignatius says, the insofar as, is this going to help you be a young man or woman? And you know what? It's a funny thing. If you get them thinking, which is not easy for a college student today, is to say, really, if you think about it, get them thinking and say, what do you value? And is this going to help them move towards that values? That's a very good question. She's got the, oh, I think she, okay.
Thank you. My name is Kwame Sechi. I am a member of the chaplaincy here. I have two questions, but all based upon the same preamble. So I'll try to make it as quick as possible. So in order to move forward, we know it is very important to reflect on some of the lessons that we learned from the past. And we all noticed that in the presentation, we have a lot of references to writings and incidents of the past in order to reflect upon to see how we can improve our situation today. Now, one of the biggest criticisms that we have as Catholics, we receive as Catholics, and I think as Christians, there's a fundamental lack of awareness, I think, in acknowledging acknowledging the role that the church and people within the church played in some of the worst atrocities that we as humans have experienced in the past. And particularly for those of us in this part of the world where the values such as respect for authority and respect for people in authority, church leaders, makes it very difficult to have such conversations. So, in first, the role of the church in propagating the institution of slavery and European imperialism here in Africa, which is one of the biggest criticisms we receive, particularly for those in the Pan-African movement. And then secondly, the abuse of power by people in positions of power in the church. These conversations are not being had. Is it that it is not important to have those conversations? And if it is important, how can we bridge the gap so that we, the youth, can have those conversations openly with leaders in the church? Thank you.
The question, of course, is how do we as a church move forward in light of tremendous traumas and sinfulness that we have participated in? The church is an institution established by Christ, and for some unknown reason, Jesus Christ took humanity as a business partner. Now you'd think God would have known better. It's very interesting that when we look at the church, that the church has always been a means of implementing the gospel by means of power, intellectual power, civic power. And corrupt individuals will always go to where they can exercise their corruption. So they're going to go to the church. Even though that need to express corruption may be a psychological inner movement, they may not even be aware of it. That one of the things we have to recognize first and foremost is that Christ chose humanity as a business partner in the church, and humanity is sinful. And so what we have to look and say, and that sin, there's a great story St. Augustine has. It's called The Stealing of the Pears. St. Augustine was the coolest 16-year-old dude there ever was, and he and his fellow students, friends, jumped a wall and stole some pears. And they didn't need the pears. They didn't want the pears. They took the pears and they threw the pears against the wall. And St. Augustine says, you know what? I did not even need the Gospels, because when I stole those pears and I reflect on it, I knew it was wrong and I chose to do it anyway. So I think one of the things as the church we have to realize is we're a sinner and we have all chosen to do evil. Evil essentially is not difference in kind, it is difference in degree. So I think we have to admit it. First of all, then we have to admit it's not that we need to change our values, we have to make sure that the values are being followed. So I think what we have to be is very open in looking at the structures that allowed for this. But I think what we have to say is, and this is what's happened in the United States, everyone said, oh, pedophilia, look at the Catholic priesthood. Well, all of a sudden, it became every sports department in every state school. Well, we didn't want to look at that. We just want to look over here. So what we are really looking at is not so much a Catholic problem. We are looking at the human desire to exert ourselves over other persons. And so what we have to do is, as Catholics, bring it to that level of how we can all talk about how we are going to stop doing this. It's not a Catholic problem. And we confuse the issue if we think it's a Catholic problem. But we have to look at it the problem of it is part of human sinfulness as the desire. But to your point, what the Catholic churches have to say is we have to identify our values, we have to identify the structures in which this is not going to happen again, and like any good system of education, how do we continue to moderate that? And I think, you know, if we start pointing fingers about sinful past, somehow we have to ask forgiveness of not just Catholics against economic. We have to, as a human community, everybody has stepped on each other. This ain't a Catholic thing. Now, unfortunately, people have gotten into the Catholic Church. We have to recognize this. But I think if it's used against us, I use the story of Jesus said, he who is without sin cast the first stone. That very much we cannot look at these issues as Catholic problems. This is a human problem, and humans share with Christ in the Catholic Church. So it is an issue, but I think what we have to do is bring that issue to the really human level, and then dialogue. Thank you.
Okay, there's one here.
Oh, she's got, okay, sister, yes.
Yeah, I'm Sister Gifty Aban, a member of the Society of the Holy Child Jesus. When you hear of Jesuit education, it's synonymous to the development of the intellect. All about the intellect. And we are talking about acquisition of values and transmission of values and even the skills to acquire to transmit these values to the future generation. In your educational philosophies or practices for the past years, is there anything that you can't bring in to kind of balance that of the development of the intellect and that of the formation of the heart? Because if you develop the intellect without any formation of the heart or morality, these values may not even be properly be acquired, talk less of being transmitted to the next generation. So are we not doing a job that is not completely done if our emphasis is all about the intellect? Can we also talk about formation of the heart and balance this? Thank you.
Remember I talked about the trivium, and philosophy, those higher sciences come after. And it doesn't mean you study one thing and you leave the next. If you want to understand what it means human, not human for a Catholic, not human for a Jew, not human for a Muslim, is you study literature, the great plays. Sophocles, Euripides, Aeschylus, Shakespeare, all stories from the African tradition. And what you have to do is when you teach the higher levels, you have to always bring literature with it. And that's a good point. And sometimes what happens is we lose our humanity. But that's why in the Jesuit system, the humanities are the foundation. The foundation is the reference. What does it mean to be human? What are the stories that touch our hearts? What we have to do in continuing in education is to continue those stories in chemistry, in physics, in higher levels of philosophy, in theology. Keep those stories that humanize us. And when we tell those stories, it puts the higher intellectual life into perspective. And that goes back to the point of Ignatius says, the insofar as, how is this higher knowledge in relation to the love of God and love of neighbor? And if you want, if the Jesuits here, especially those who have studied Latin, that's tantum quantum. That's the Latin for insofar as. And that became the motto. You're doing this insofar as it brings you to love of God and love your neighbor. It always has to throw you back. And so what happens, as you brought up, is we tend to go off the edge and we worry about the details. And so what we have to remember is our roots, our foundation, are in the humanities, in our literature. Thank you.
So I'm Mavis Mensah. I work at the University of Cape Coast, and I'm a member of this chaplaincy. Thank you for the insightful presentation. I would like to commend the Jesuit for what they are doing, pursuing freedom and justice through education. But my main concern is what is the church doing about the dignity of our students? And I'm happy the Hobsons are here. I'm a Hobson myself. About 20 years ago, the school used to be different, and we could see our dignity being promoted. And now with free SHS, you have, these students crowded. You have a whole lot of things going on. We don't want to talk about that. With the state participating in our education, what can we do to really correct what is going on in our already established schools, St. Augustine's Holy Child, St. Monica's, etc., as we also support you in your endeavors. Thank you.
Well, thank you. And I think what you're saying is sort of a diminishment of Christian and Catholic identity in our schools. The lower the value, the lower the structure. If students do not see something as a value, they're not going to. So first of all, we ourselves have to demonstrate why a Christian worldview is important. And so what kind of happened with emphasis on education is we got emphasis on the externals to be successful. But what we always have to do is, everyone in this room is charged with evangelization to teach to young children why this is important. The higher the value, the higher the structure. If you see a diminishment in structure, you're going to see a diminishment in value. So we have to ask ourselves is, are we clear in why this is a value? Fashion is a value in the United States, and boy, everybody knows what to wear and what not to wear because it's perceived as a value. So very much, and it has to be starting with the family. I would say all of us, what are we doing to support our families in promoting Catholic values? What are we doing to support schools? The support and to say that faith is not over here and intellect is over here. We're going to integrate this. It's very interesting in the United States when the immigrants came. The first thing they built was the school. And the church was in the basement, and then they built the church, was the implementation of these values. So I think we have to ask ourselves is, how are we individually witnesses to Catholic values? And then I think if the more people see that, so yeah, and I think we all need to step up to the plate. It's just not the priests and the nuns. It's everybody has to say, what are we doing to implement in our own hearts and then bringing Catholic values to others? Thank you.
Thank you, Father. Let's give it up to ourselves. I think it's been fruitful. We will quickly take a comment from Very Reverend Father Mechan and the Rep of His Grace, the Archbishop. Let's give it up to him as he comes.
Thank you. Thank you, Father, and thank you, Prof. Chair. I'd like to congratulate the Society of Jesus for their 50th anniversary and for organizing this public lecture. We are actually up to a very difficult task as far as our values are concerned. The adults amongst us here witness to the fact that our values as Catholics and also as Ghanaians are gradually being eroded. We have a daunting task. As Father rightly pointed out in his address, we need to remain firm in our faith in God, because education is primarily also to inculcate in us the fear of God, which will lead us to recognize the dignity, the rights of every individual human being. The human dignity is not something that we acquire here on earth. We are actually born with that dignity. And as Pope Francis has rightly said in his document recently regarding the dignity of the human person, it is God-given. It's something that is not handed on to us by any system or by any individual or group of individuals. You and I will have to start wherever we are, do whatever we can to live this fear of God and try to have a positive impact on other people and to help others also to respect and recognize the dignity of the individual. We thank you, Father, for this illustrated exposition, and we hope and pray that this will inspire us to do the little that we can to promote the dignity of the human person, the rights of the human person for a just society. Amen. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Father. At this point, permit me to invite Father Emmanuel Ngoeche, SJ President Designate of CJC, to give us a brief presentation on the proposed Campion Jesuit College in Ghana. Let's give it up to him, please.
Thank you, Madam MC. There is always a consequence of a good lecture. And there's always a consequence of an anniversary. And one of the consequences of this 50th anniversary is the establishment of Campion Jesuit College. I call it consequences because it will have some effects, some implications on us. We have spent 50 years working in Ghana. We've taught in several schools. We've taught in the University of Ghana, Legon. We have taught in St. Augustine's College. We have taught in Holy Child College. We have taught in Catholic University of Ghana. In fact, the first Vice Chancellor, if you like, was a Jesuit, Father Michael Shutais. He helped to establish the Catholic University of Ghana. And now, after 50 years, one of the fruits of this anniversary is that we want to own our own school and start our own school. And it is called Campion Jesuit College. And having said that, that's the introduction, I want to stand on all already established protocols to say, good afternoon, Chair Prof, and the representative of the Archbishop and Father Michael and all of you. I want to say thank you for coming and thank you for your generosity in coming for this event. As I said, the consequences of having a talk like this is to have more talks and to have something concrete. So Father spoke in general about Jesuit education and our values. I'm going to particulars. And I called this Jesuit education and statistics. And if you look at that, sorry, the fonts are small. I was trying to squeeze in a number of things. We have the largest network of schools in the Catholic Church. The largest network of schools in the Catholic Church. We're involved in about 2,700 institutions and education and projects. 2,700 plus institutions and educational projects. We have over, as I speak with you, around 2020, we had over 3.3 million students. We have over 100 million alumni. And we work in over 90 plus countries. We have over 700 secondary schools in the world, over 65 secondary schools in Africa, over 177 universities and colleges. In the US alone, we have 28 universities and colleges run by the Society of Jesus. We are coming home. So we have over 476 years of managing schools. 476 years of managing school. First Jesuit school was established in Messina in Italy in 1548. And as Father mentioned, we did not start with education. We started with the spiritual exercises. We trained our men. And important princes and princesses in Europe saw how we were training our men, and they said to us, we want you to train our children the way you train your recruits. That's how we got into education. And they wrote to the head of the Society of Jesus, Father Ignatius of Loyola, saying, please, we want you to send us Jesuits to come and train our children the way you train your recruits. And pay attention to this. Father Ignatius said to them, okay, I will send you some Jesuits to train your children the way I train my recruits, on the condition that you provide accommodation and you provide food for them. Somebody asked about the question, asked about how do we pay for the education of our children, that Jesuit education is pricey. But right from the beginning, Father Ignatius said, don't start a school until it is fully funded. And that spirit has helped us over the years. There is a school in New York City, Regis High School, that was established around 1910. And somebody gave a lump sum of money, said, use this to build the school, and the remainder use it to endow the school, such that everybody that has gone through Regis High School in New York has not paid a peswa because of the woman that donated the property and endowed the school. I am from Nigeria, as you can see. And we have 5 Jesuit secondary schools. 4 out of the 5 Jesuit schools that we run have been donated. 1 was donated by the River State government in memory of our 60 students that perished in 2005. 1 in Lagos, the land was donated by a Muslim. Gonzaga Jesuit College in Okija was donated by an individual, built and given to us to run. Arupe Jesuit College, Abbey in Delta State, fully built and given to us. 5 schools. That's how we've been establishing the schools we have in Nigeria. And a number of places too is like that. So, we talk about the unique Ignatian pedagogy we are bringing. We keep talking about the intellectual aspects of Jesuit education. Further, really broke it down by talking about the values we talk about. We try to inculcate in our students. And we summarize those values with the 4 C's. One is conscience. We want our students to form their conscience to choose right. We want our students to be competent. That is the intellectual aspect. We want our students to be capable students. We want our students to be men and women of compassion. We want our students to be men and women of competence. Out of those 4 values, only one is focused on what? Intellectualism. Others are on soft skills, if you know what I'm talking about. So, we go. We have arrived in Ghana, Campion Jesuit College. So I was assigned to come to Ghana to work with the Ghanaian Jesuits so that we can start Campion Jesuit College. And we have a property in Budwata. Budwata is about 12 minutes drive from Winneba, and it's not far from Bujumbura, coming from Accra to Cape Coast. And going from Cape Coast to Accra, after Winneba, is 12 minutes drive. It's on a 66 acres of land. We have started building the Jesuit community. We are at the foundation level right now. So, to recall, Campion Jesuit College, named after the British Jesuit martyr Edmund Campion. That's why we call it Campion Jesuit College. And you can see it, we have the crest already. The nature of the school and why, we want to start with basic 7 actually, junior high school, then it's going to be co-ed, it's going to be boarding. Why? Because we want to have enough time to inculcate Jesuit values. We want to be able to sustain the school. We want to make it a national school. That's why we are choosing and starting from then. Then from junior high, we go to senior high school. And because we are Jesuit, we are not going to just do STEM. We are going to also do STEAM, if you know what I mean. Science, technology, yes. Engineering, yes. Arts. You see, I have sneaked in arts because of what? Humanities. And our students will compulsorily take some courses to help them develop good heart, good conscience. And that's why we have put in arts there. And the last one is what? Mathematics. So, this is the layout of the school. This is what it's going to be like. Now, our needs. Our needs. We need support and collaboration. The first thing there is tell God and people about us. Tell God and people about us. How do you tell God and people about? Pray for us and help us spread the word. Send your children to us. That is very important. If you don't have children, we can't start the school. And send us your children, send us your relations, those who are in primary 5 now, going to primary 6, because we are hoping to start in October next year, God willing. We have established an educational endowment fund to cater to the needs of those who don't have the financial resources, and for those students who are brilliant. So we will have merit-based scholarship. We also have need-based scholarship. And we already have established the endowment. So we're encouraging people to help us with this. And the idea is to build up the funds and use the interest. Build up the funds, invest the funds, and use the interest to finance the scholarships of our students. So the capital will continue to grow. We will not touch the capital, but we invest the capital and use the interest accruing from the capital to service this account. Please copy this account. I'm serious. I'm not seeing you copying the account. Oh, you have it. Oh, yeah. It's in the brochure that you have been given. It's there. So tell people to help us. We want to attract some of the best students. At the same time, we want to attract students who cannot ordinarily pay the school fees. And we just got an email. That's the email, if you want, president@campionjesuitcollege.org. If you send emails to me, I will receive that. Edmond Campion was known for this statement, Campion's brag. He said, the experience is reckoned. The enterprise is begun. It is of God, it cannot be withstood. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Father. And before we take the closer remarks of our chairman, permit me to make the following acknowledgements. So I want to acknowledge Professor Domwini Dabire Kompoli, the former Vice Chancellor of the University of Cape Coast, who is also acting as our chairman for this occasion. Let's give it up to him. Thank you so much for coming. Very Reverend Father Bonaventure Annan, representing His Grace the Archbishop Charles Palmer Buckle. Thank you for being here. And of course, Father Michael Mao, SG, our speaker. Thank you. And we just received the Vice Chancellor of the University of Cape Coast, Professor Johnson Nyakobwampo. Thank you so much for joining us. VC, God bless you for coming. We have the roommates that was spoken about earlier, who didn't allow Prof to go to the seminary. Professor Mrs. Alfredina A.Z. Kupoli. She's also the chairperson of Our Lady Seat of Wisdom Chaplaincy Pastoral Council. Thank you for being here. And we have our host also with us, Father McQueen, chaplain of this great chaplaincy. We have Reverend Father TSA, yes, SJ, Provincial Country Delegate Ghana, thank you for being here. We have Brother John Afum, Provincial Superior, Holy Cross. We appreciate you coming. Then we have Mr. Emmanuel Esuman, Regional Director of Education, Central Region. We acknowledge Mrs. Diana Osei, the Regional Manager of Catholic Education Unit, Central Region, Cape Coast. We have Mr. Henry Arthur Jan, the Headmaster of St. Augustine's College, Cape Coast. We have Very Reverend Father Robert Charles Sniper, the Rector of the St. Peter's Major Seminary, Peidu. We have Very Reverend Father Dr. Emmanuel Abikwe, lecturer at the Peidu Seminary. I think he just walked out. We have Very Reverend Father Eric Awachidatsen, who is also a lecturer at the Peidu Seminary. We have Nana Efua Roxon, the PRO of IEPA Category 2 Institute, UCC. Thank you for coming, Madam. We have Professor Emeritus Kofi Awosabo Asari with us. Thank you for being here. We have Dr. Sister Alice Nsia with us. Thank you for being here. Professor Isaac Galleon, the former provost of the College of Distance Education, is also with us, UCC. Thank you for coming. We have Professor Mavis Benemensa also in our midst. Thank you for being here, Professor. Then we have Professor and Dr. Mrs. Kwating also in our midst. We appreciate your presence. Thank you for being here. We have Dr. Paul Agu Asari also in our midst. Dr. Paul Agu Asari is also in our midst. Thank you so much for being here. We have Dr. Dorothy Techakwa also in our midst. Thank you for being here, Doc. Dr. Cornelius Adum Techi, who doubles as the catechist of Our Lady Seat of Wisdom Chaplaincy. We have Dr. D'Souza also with us. Thank you for being here. We have Dr. Senite and Mrs. Honey also with us. Thank you for coming. And of course, Professor and Mrs. Kofi also are here with us. And it is worthy to note that Professor Kofi is the composer of the UCC anthem. So if you love it, thank him. Thank you for being here. We have Reverend Father Dr. Opong also in our midst. Thank you so much for being here, Father. God bless you. We have staff and students of the Holy Child School also with us. Thank you for being here. We have the brothers from Holy Cross also in our midst. We appreciate your presence so much. We have students of PAX, UCC Local also here. Professor Machi, of course. Thank you. Thank you so much, brother, for being here. We are most grateful. We would never forget our Cafdil team, led by Father David Okran. Thank you for telecasting this. In fact, if you want to visit or revise whatever Father said, you can go to their YouTube channel, Cafdil TV, and it's there. Thank you so much. Permit me to invite our able chair for his closing remarks.
If you don't mind, I'll just stand here. It's not out of laziness. All right. My Vicar General, the Speaker, le Révérend Père Michel, Stompri, and Reverend Fathers, colleagues, and everybody. Of course, I acknowledge the presence of my Vice Chancellor, who's joined us, and so everybody is acknowledged. My papers are flying. Now, I said at the beginning, I'm not used to summarizing anything. And from the questions, the comments, remarks made, I dare say the lecture has been duly digested, it has been well understood, and thanks to the comments and questions, I have succeeded in also understanding some of the aspects. The issue about stupid people being at the being at the bottom, or in, the creators of crisis, I think it's quite true. Not stupid in the sense of being foolish, but stupid in the sense that they have misapplied the education received. There's misuse of the education received. Just like procurement, when we misapply funds, we are sent to court. But people are misusing the education that they should have used for the service of humanity, you know. And it is the case of so many of our politicians and some of us, myself included. We don't use the education that we have received to solve societal problems for the common good of everybody. We'd rather use education for our own good and for the good of our nucleus, immediate family. That is my understanding of the stupidity personified in terms of crisis. And now there's this advert I always remember. It's by some young students who completed technical universities, and the complaint is that they are told education is the key to everything. Education opens doors for them. They have received the key, that is, they've received the education, but the politicians have taken the lock away. They've replaced the lock. So the key that they have, they cannot open it. We can place that in our own context and see what is happening. Every day, some of us have people knocking at the doors to help them get admission. When they finish the university, we should help them get jobs. We cannot help them get jobs. And that brings to question the education we are giving, from the basic through to the tertiary. Are we providing the needed education that should help people respect the dignity of others, that should help them become useful citizens in society? I think these are questions we have all raised. Otherwise, education, being a structure, should have values. And let's again ask ourselves, what are the values of our current education system? What do we have as values? What do we pass on? We are talking of LBGT something. Is that part of our educational values? Is that part of the Ghanaian values that we should introduce in education? And we have people supporting that. Oh, come on. Come on. You know, we have taken off or taken out religion and moral education as time to be corrected. Or we are literally not doing anything about that. What are we doing about our religious values, our cultural values? We used to have civic education, and that's how come I learned courtesy for boys and girls offhand. Where is that civic education in our education system? And every day, any government coming to power thinks the best to do is to introduce a system that is foreign to our own cultural background. We should, as a people, we should begin to question all these things. We should have the courage to question these things and to tell whoever is there that, look, that is not the kind of education we want. Where's a mass education? And in leadership, we're talking of the Bamulis concept. Zero debt, mass passing, educate everybody, don't fail anybody. Yet, there is no matching funding to do quality education. So as leaders of church, as leaders of institutions, we have to answer some of the questions. But the talk has been very insightful. Of course, it's taken from the general perspective of Jesuit education. And as I said, the literature that we read in French taught us that Jesuit education has been the best. It has been a very solid education, teaching children the necessary values to survive in society and to respect the dignity of society, of every individual, the rights of every individual, and to live as people of value. So, the summary of this lecture is that education is key, and education, justice, and freedom, they form a kind of tripod, a tripod. You see, they are linked together. You cannot take education out of justice. You cannot take freedom out of education. They are linked and linked in terms of the human values, in terms of the human rights, and all that. But in all this, if you take God out of all this system, that is this tripod, if you take God out of that, then you have nothing. You have destroyed the structure. And that is what I think we are doing in Ghana now. We are destroying our values, we are destroying our structures, we are destroying our system because a lot of us have taken God, our creator, out of what we call education, whether formal or informal, whether traditional or European, whatever form it may take. God is at the center of all that. So thank you very much, cher ami, and for those of you who have listened and contributed, I say thank you for your collaboration, for your understanding and cooperation. Without your cooperation, we wouldn't have come this far. And thanks also to those who deemed it fit to invite me to be part of this morning's talk. I should have been in Accra, but I felt it was necessary to be here because the Jesuit education, missionary education in general, is very key to me. It is the Catholic education that has made me who I am today and my family, and we are grateful. Thank you very much.
Thank you to Professor Chair. I would invite Father Reginald Tiesa to continue with the Thanksgiving. Let's give it up to him as he comes.
Thank you. I have learned from this lecture that it is your fundamental right to be thanked. So thank you all. But permit me to single out some special individuals. The chair, Professor Dongwini Dabire Kumpoli, the Archbishop's representative, the Vicar General, Father Bonaventure Annan, the Regional Director of Education, Mr. Emmanuel Esumai, the Vice Chancellor, University of Ghana, Professor Johnson Nyako, Cape Coast, thanks for the correction. The chaplain of the Catholic Chaplaincy, Father Mark Queening, distinguished dignitaries, priests and religious here present, invited guests, students, friends of the Society of Jesus, ladies and gentlemen. I am indeed happy to be here to give the vote of thanks. Pierre Teilhard de Chardin once said, "It is the dignity of things, it is the destiny of things real to destroy those that are artifice. This is what commitment to what is real in life, seen through the lens of faith, led St. Ignatius and his companions to affect the human spirit in unique ways. What we have witnessed today is a truth that is still unfolding in our part of the world. On behalf of the provincial, Reverend Father John Ganser, SJ, I am honored to extend our heartfelt gratitude to all who have gathered here for this enlightening public lecture. First and foremost, our deepest gratitude to our esteemed speaker, Father Michael Maha. Your insightful presentation on the topic, Jesuit education and its search for freedom and justice, was truly thought-provoking and enlightening. You have made us appreciate what authentically should be the goals of education and why Jesuit education over the years has had enduring impact in the lives of many in the world, even for students here present. It shapes and redefines how we are to evaluate our individual education. Thank you, your chair, for steering the affairs of today to a successful end, and also the Archbishop's representative, Father Bonaventure. Thank you for your presence. Your presence affirms the importance of education in the Catholic faith. Our coming to faith is a form of education. You have made time to be with us in solidarity with every effort to promote the dignity of the human person, particularly through education. We appreciate your sacrifices to be here with us. To the dignitaries and professors here present, you will agree with me that if all students at the university had equally been shaped by such values of education, the work at the university level would have been easier and more impactful in society. We are grateful for your presence and support. It is our hope that with your influence and support, Jesuit education will find a footing in Ghana and spread across the entire country and beyond. We appreciate your presence and contribution to the success of today's lecture. We also wish to express our sincere appreciation to the steering committee for organizing this wonderful event. Particular mention must be made of Father Emmanuel Uweje, SJ, chairman of the committee, and Father Evans Apia, SJ, and Ofori Francis, SJ. Father Kevin Ode, who is in Nigeria, and the socials to the provincial, Father Izioku Amadi, SJ. As well as all Jesuit companions in Ghana and Nigeria, and some collaborators who helped put the ideas into graphic form. Your meticulous planning and seamless execution have ensured that everything ran smoothly, allowing us all to benefit fully from this experience. Our gratitude extends to the management of the university for permitting us to host this important event in this hall and for providing us with such a conducive environment and the necessary resources to make this event a success. Your support has been invaluable. I would also like to thank our volunteers and support staff who have worked tirelessly behind the scenes. Your dedication and hard work have not gone unnoticed, and we are deeply thankful for your contributions. To our esteemed audience, thank you for your presence and participation. Your engagement and thoughtful questions have enriched this lecture, making it a more interactive and meaningful experience. Lastly, let us carry forward the knowledge and insights we have gained today and continue to engage in such enriching discussions. We look forward to your continued support and participation in the future. To conclude, Professor Ali Mazrui, a Ugandan political philosopher, was once asked to define politics, and he said, "Politics is philosophy, reflected in tranquility and acted in confusion." I want to assure you, Father Maha, that what has been reflected in tranquility will not be acted in confusion, but rather we will transmit these values to the younger generations after us. Thank you all, and God bless you.
And finally, I want to thank myself for comparing this august occasion. This has been the public lecture to celebrate the 50th anniversary of the presence of Jesuit in Ghana, and we hope that we have earned the privilege of your time. God bless you for coming. We'll take our benediction, and after that, we'll have a group picture. Please stay for the group picture. We'll just take it in here, and after the group picture, kindly go back to your seat. Our fathers have a gift for us. Father Anand, please do us the honors for the benediction. Shall we rise, please?
In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. God, our Heavenly Father, source of life, we stand in your presence this morning to thank you for this public lecture, by way of getting to know you more, to serve you faithfully. We thank you for the gracious exposition by Father Matthew. We thank you for the presence of each and every one here, and we thank you for this day which you have blessed us with. As we depart from here, may we continue to live what we have learned here in any way that we can. Help us to be agents of peace, of respect, and of justice. May your grace continue to strengthen us in this apostolate, so all we do may be for the greater glory of your name. This we ask through Christ our Lord. The Lord be with you.
And with your spirit.
And may Almighty God bless you, the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit.
Amen.
Thank you.
Thank you. So please let's come forward to take the picture with the Vice Chancellor, the Chair, Father Ma, and Father Anand in front, and the rest of us behind them. Thank you. Please let's come forward quickly. Just here.
By the grace of God, we've come to a successful close of this public lecture, talking about the 50 years of Jesuit presence here in Ghana. And I have with me Sir Knight Dr. Honey. You're most welcome.
Thank you very much.
It's been a while.
I know. I hope you're doing well.
Yes, please. Doc, what do you make of this public lecture?
I feel that this is a very important subject because this country is going through a period of difficulty in terms of the direction of its education. The education has been infiltrated by all sorts of ideas and ideologies. And now we have to go back to re-educate the youth about the morality of education, which was the subject of this lecture. So I believe that is a very important area for all of us to discuss.
Have you in any way personally experienced the Jesuit priest?
Yes, I have known the Jesuits since they arrived in the country. Father Raymond Adams, who unfortunately was attacked in his residence and murdered, brutally assaulted by someone, was a good friend of ours. And I've known almost all of them from the time of all the early fathers who were the leaders of the Jesuit community. And currently we have very good relations with them, both myself and my wife, and we see them regularly. And on this note, I want to send my sympathies to Father Don, who is not well. We hope that he'll recover very soon from his illness.
So there is this new introduction of the Campion College, which Father Emmanuel spoke about. How do you think, or in which way do you think this is going to impact something into the youths of Ghana?
I hope they will be left alone to pursue the ideals of their education, because we have seen mission education attacked by unnecessary forces of politics. I could even call them forces of evil, because they are undermining the integrity of Catholic and Christian education. And I do hope and pray that the Jesuits would be allowed the time and space to pursue the ideals of their education, which everybody knows are of a very high level and order.
Thank you very much, Doc.
You're welcome. Thank you. I wish you well.
Thank you.
I am Owusu Ofori Francis.
So you are a Ghanaian?
Yes.
You don't look like one.
I've gotten that several times.
Okay, so you are still in formation?
Yes.
Okay. Where?
I am currently doing some practice. I finished journalism, studies in journalism not too long ago, so I'm still in the process, yes.
Okay. So to begin with,
level we call it special studies.
Special studies, that's nice. How did you meet the Jesuits?
Well, I think fortunately for me, I got to know about the Jesuits when I was in high school through reading. I found a book that had SJ written on them, and so I inquired more about them, and I discovered actually they were in Ghana. So that's where it all began. And since then, the experience has been very wonderful, eye-opening, and also moving one towards God more and more. Yeah.
I know you are glad to be part of this 50 years celebration. I'm giving you this opportunity to invite young men to join the Jesuit family.
Thank you very much. I think this is a great opportunity for we, the younger ones, especially in Ghana, that have the calling to be part of this great organization that has been in existence for over 400 years, to also contribute our God-given bit, God-given talent in the religious life towards the development of our nation and our people. So I will encourage all that have the wherewithal, that have the will, the passion, and the natural talent, and also believe in the Jesuit tradition, the Jesuit ideals, to come up to apply. We have one of our parishes in Accra at Spintex Batruna, St. Ignatius of Loyola Parish. We also have some of our brothers in Cape Coast. We have a retreat center too in Cape Coast. That is the Cleaver House Center. They can come in and know more about us, and then from there, I'm sure they will be able to find their true path to Christ. Yeah.
Thank you also for joining us. I have now the representative of the Archbishop in the person of Very Reverend Father Bonaventure Anand, the Vicar General for the Cape Coast Archdiocese. You are welcome.
Thank you, Sister.
What do you make of today's public lecture?
Oh, I think it's very insightful and thought-provoking, I should say, because looking at the pedagogy of the Jesuits in education, education should really actually, lead us to God, and that ultimately will lead us to, the values that he pointed out in his speech.
So, talking of this new education project by the Jesuits, how successful do you think this is going to be? Because you know that now religious or mission schools are not finding it that easy in our country. So how do you think this is going to be successful?
Thank you, sister. It's always challenging because of the free. I know that when the Holy Cross Brothers decided to go into education at Kaswa, initially they experienced this challenge with low numbers, but now the school is full. You see, we need to look at the quality, and not look at the fact that I'm not paying for it and everything is being taken care of. But we need to look at at the quality. So possibly or probably initially they may have some low numbers, but let's give ourselves time, and I think everybody will fall for it.
Any congratulatory message for the Jesuits?
I would like to congratulate the Jesuit community for 50 years of presence here in Ghana. They have been an inspiration and a big contribution to the church spiritually, because I know they also direct retreats. They teach, in some of our educational institutions, and I know they are really making a big difference. So we congratulate them, and we hope the future is bright, and I will pray God to bless them and to bless their efforts with success. Thank you, sister.
Thank you, Father, for coming. Good afternoon, Father.
Good afternoon, sister.
Your name again?
I'm Reverend Father Reginald Tiesa, SJ, a Jesuit, yes.
Okay. Do you work in Ghana?
Yes, I'm in a parish in Accra, St. Ignatius of Loyola Catholic Church.
Okay. For how many years?
I started in 2019. I relieved one of my brothers who had to go to Kenya for a brief program, but during the COVID era, he couldn't really make it. He couldn't really make it to Ghana again, so I stayed longer. Then there was a brief break before I took over finally in 2021.
Okay, so how are the Jesuits doing in Ghana? Are you actually known?
I would say yes, because a couple of our Jesuit brothers have worked and have contributed their quota to the development of the church in Ghana. We can talk about Father Patrick Ryan, who was the first Jesuit to get to Ghana, teaching at the University of Ghana, and later on he came to teach at the University of Cape Coast. A couple of Ghanaian Catholics who were in school at that time speak highly of how he contributed to the life of the church in Ghana. And we can also talk of Father Donald Himfi, who has also taught in the major seminary here, St. Peter's, for over 30 years. So he has also contributed his quota, and most of the priests and religious in Ghana know about him. In terms of apostolates, we have not had many apostolates. Basically, the retreat house in Cape Coast, we have a parish in Accra, and also we have started a social center in Accra also at the Atomic Hill. These are the apostolates we run so far, but we are hoping gradually will spread to other parts of the country.
Okay. So let's look at Jesuit education in Ghana. What have you been able to do in the past?
In terms of education, I would say probably the formation of priests. That has been the major, and then some of our Jesuits working in the universities, as I've mentioned, Legon and UCC. But in terms of starting a school proper, this is the first time we are coming to start a school at Gomua Buduata, which we heard in the presentation today.
Okay. So my next question is, what do you intend to do in the future to ensure that this education thing you are going to start penetrates every corner of the Ghanaian society?
Our Jesuit education, as we heard in the presentation made by Father Emmanuel, there are 4 C's, not only leaning on the competence, but also compassion of the heart. So gradually, if we have a few Jesuit schools in the country, these competence will be instilled in our youth, and that will help in the development of the country, and especially Catholic education. So the first is always to have a step, and Campion Jesuit College is the first step we are making. Hopefully in the future we'll spread to Kumasi and towards the north as well, so that Jesuit education can also spread across the country.
Thank you very much, Father.
You're most welcome.
Any message for your brothers watching you?
I would say I invite everyone listening and who has bought into the ideology of Jesuit education to rally around to help the society establish the schools. You can point us in the right direction to people who are capable of supporting us and collaborating with us so that we give the best to the Ghanaian society.
Thank you very much, Father.
You're most welcome.
And happy anniversary.
I wish you the same. Thanks.
Good afternoon and you're welcome.
Thank you.
Your name, please.
Emmanuel Suman, the Regional Director of Education, Central.
Oh, okay, nice meeting you in person.
I'm grateful.
Okay. Did you come as the Director of Education or because you believe in the educational ideology of the Jesuits?
Not necessarily. In fact, I was invited as a Regional Director of Education. So that's why I came, not necessarily believing the Jesuit education.
Were you impressed about the public lecture?
Yes, it was fantastic.
So what are you taking home?
Yeah, it's one, I took two things. One is the issue that the stupid people created this confusion is another thing that, because it's a shared responsibility. So we all take, we the policy makers and the policy implementers, and if you link to the lecture, going back to the family, we all have a role to play. As a family, we should be concerned of the kind of values we are giving to our children. We shouldn't leave those assignment to only the school or the teachers to handle or the educational managers to handle. So we have all a role to play, the government and then the politicians, everybody. So it's one thing, like the Prof. Chair said, idiot or stupid doesn't mean doing something absurd, but knowing the right thing, but ignoring it. So we are all ignoring that. We know the right thing to give to our students, but we are not doing the right thing. So that one is, and then again, said education is based on systems and structures. Yes. And then within the structure, we have the values. So the stronger the structure, the stronger the values. The weaker the structure, then the weaker the values. So, like I said again, I will link it to, we have a equal responsibility to build the value as Ghanaians we want our children to do or to have. So if we compromise with this value, we are weakening the structure or the system of education we have. And these are the two key things I've taken from this. And I think it's worthy of attending this lecture.
Since you are the Director of Education or a Director of Education in Ghana, you know how mission schools are suffering. Either it is taken over by the government, and the ones that are run by the church is kind of experiencing some difficulties now. How do you see the future of this new education project of the Jesuits?
It's a very brilliant, and you can see from the structure. If you have a strong curriculum that, with the intention of the ideas and values that we want our children to have. Someone asked a question that it was the chair, Prof. Chair, that they had a challenge of supporting people to get admission. But after completion, they came back again for job, of which they cannot provide. So we are looking, the new system is looking at concentrating on the practicality of whatever we are teaching them in schools. We want them to problem solving. We want them to be innovative. We want them to be creative so that they can compete globally. Not only having the book knowledge, but they can also practicalize everything that they learn. That's why we are bringing in the STEM and the STEAM. So I think we are moving from the objective-based into the standard-based curriculum where the practical aspect, the learner is the center of instruction. So I think it is good, and it's, if you compare the question that you asked, the mission school and the government school, it's the thing is, previously used to be managed or run by the missions, yes, and you go to a point there was some challenge, so either they agreed for government to take over, or what I want to say is there was some understanding between the missions and then the government. So it's a collective thing that we the responsibilities, whatever, if it is in terms of the values, then the mission schools can also take that aspect to support what government is also doing.
Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you very much. I'm grateful for the opportunity.
Young lady, how are you?
Yes, I'm fine, thank you.
Your name?
I'm Clara Ntama.
What are you taking home?
Okay, so what I heard from him is that he said, okay, not him in particular, but then Father Michael said something, that stupid people are the people creating problems now. And so, and then later Prof said something that the stupid he said doesn't mean like foolish or something, but he's trying to say people who are educated and then are not making good use of what they've learned. So I think I would have to learn, study, and if I'm well educated, I have to make good use of it and help my society.
Okay, so what course are you studying?
General science.
So what would you like to be in future?
I want to be a medical doctor.
That's nice. Give a message to your colleagues out there why they should take their books seriously.
Yes, please. It's difficult sometimes, but I know that when you learn and then you pray as well, God will help us. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Nice meeting you.
Nice meeting you.
We'll meet another time.
Yes, please. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, and you are most welcome.
Good afternoon, Reverend Sister, and thank you very much.
For those who are now joining us, can you give us a brief introduction of yourself?
I'm Didi Kumpole, former Vice Chancellor, University of Cape Coast, and a farmer in the Upper West region in banana, sorghum, and maize. Thank you very much. But I'm a lecturer of French language at the University of Cape Coast. Thank you. Briefly.
That's nice. In your acceptance notes, I heard the part where you said you tried this banana plantation when everybody thought it wasn't possible in the north, right?
That's quite true. It's quite true, but it's a hybrid variety that I got from Burkina Faso, and it's thriving very well, and that has introduced a change in the nutritional values of the families in Nandom area and even beyond. Yes, so it's rain-fed, but during the dry season we pump water from the Black Volta to irrigate. Yeah, and it's doing very well. Yes.
Anytime I visit the north, I'll try and come and see you.
You'll be most welcome, and you'll see what is going on there. I've introduced banche, cassava, and it's very much demanded in the area, and it's very good for fufu and MPC. Yes, nice. Yes. This time I'm introducing coconut seedlings. I have about 80 of them planted, and I'm hoping that they will do well because they are the hybrid and the dwarf. Okay. Yeah, they will do very well. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. So, how are you related to the Jesuits?
I would say no family relations. but just that they are I have a lot of them who are friends. And our relationship is in terms of the education, because they value education, and I value education. And as I said, I like educated persons that help to educate others. And so it is the education, particularly of the Jesuit, that has made me who and what I am today. I'm still looking for knowledge. I'm still looking for better education. I hope to find that one day. But the Jesuit relationship is that of friendship, that of their relationship, and should I say, that of their social interventions. That is it. And they are a community I normally like to be with, to discuss with, and to work with. Yeah.
Do you really think the Jesuits have really impacted when it comes to education in Ghana?
I would say they are now beginning.
Okay.
They are now beginning. They haven't really impacted on Ghana's education, but they are beginning. It's better late than never. And I guess they will, now that they've started, they will do a lot more for Ghana and in Ghana, yes. They've, because Nigeria is their headquarters in Africa, there they have done a lot. They have done a lot. But I believe and trust that those who are in Ghana here and are teaching in our tertiary education, institutions, they are beginning to impact a lot the lives of young Ghanaians, the lives of some Ghanaians who are in education. And now that they are going to start their own educational institutions, I guess they will do a lot more. Yes. Yeah.
So what's your take on Prof's lecture today?
Very good, very educative, even though it is not really centered on the Ghanaian context, but it's something we can pick, we can learn lessons and apply to the Ghanaian context, yes. Otherwise, it's very instructive. And as I said in my remarks, reading some French literature, the Jesuits lived by the principles of Saint Ignatius. And that's why in the French culture, all or almost all the rich families wanted their children, especially the boys, to attend Jesuit schools. Yeah, because of the education, because of the high level and of academic excellence that the Jesuits stood for and stand for. Okay. All right.
So now Jesuits are celebrating 50 years of their presence in Ghana. What message do you have for them?
Well, a message of encouragement, never to relent in their effort, and that they should persevere, they should pursue what they are doing, their objective, their mission in Ghana. After all, Saint Ignatius did not have it easy. Yeah. He was persecuted, he suffered, yet he persevered. Jesus Christ himself did not have it easy, and that's how come he ended up on the cross, you know. And yet he didn't give up, even at the time of death. He never gave up. So my word of encouragement is that they should persevere, they should continue to do what they want to do, never discourage, never despair. With time, people will get to understand much more what they are doing and what their mission in Ghana, and for that matter, in the whole of the world, is all about. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
The pleasure is mine. I thank you very much, Reverend Sister. Yeah. Thank you.
All right. You too. So, all too soon, or it's not too soon because it's been a long day somehow, we are wrapping up for today's program, which is the 50 years celebration of the Jesuit present here in Ghana with a public lecture by Prof. If in case you missed the beginning of this program, you can get a recap of it on Facebook, Cafdil Cape Coast, and YouTube, Cafdil Edu. You can get a recap of it. And when you visit our YouTube channel, do not forget to subscribe. Click on the bell notification icon so that anytime we upload new videos, you will be the first to receive a prompt of that program. We'll meet again next time. Bye-bye.